Hey guys. Thanks very much for coming along today to this media briefing at the end of the day. I'm sorry it's slightly at the end of the day. We know that's not hugely convenient, but we appreciate you coming along. So I'd really like to introduce you to Vivek Badranath, who's our Director General of the GSMA, and Angela Wamola, who is Head of Africa. And really, you know, I think without further ado, I'll hand over to Vivek, who can kind of give a bit of an overview of the policy priorities that we're talking about today at the event, and then Angela can give a bit of a context about more of a sort of African context from the GSMA, and then we'll just go to Q&A, really. You've got the news announcements that we've issued today in front of you, and really fire away on questions. So I guess without further ado, Vivek, over to you.
Thank you very much for being here, all of you. Very happy with this event. It's starting well, good energy across the board, and good attendance. We, of course, don't publish the attendance numbers until the last day because it's the way it's done. But it's fair to say that the convening power of this location has been strong. That the government, we had the honor of the presence of President Kagame this morning for the inauguration. Minister Paula Ngabire, who has been a partner in this event for a long time, has been very supportive. What we are talking about today as GSMA, and which is kind of woven through all the discussions in the panels, in the conference, and also around the conference as well, is really about the development of, I would say, the mobile ecosystem in Africa. It's about 8 million jobs. It is 7.7% of GDP, which is more than the worldwide average at this point. So it means that mobile weighs a lot in African economy and is poised to grow. We see, so we've taken a clear focus on this with Angela and her team, and working with, in particular, what we call the G6, so you'll see the name once in a while, which is the 6 largest mobile operators in Africa, who have taken a leadership position. Doesn't mean the others aren't doing lots of great things, but since these are 6 players who are typically multi-country, it's one way to drive the agenda. And that's why we work very closely with them. They're a bit our advisory board. They tell us where we need to put effort. It's Airtel, Axian Telecom, Ethio Telecom, MTN, Orange, and Vodacom, in alphabetical order, not in size order, okay? But they're the 6. They help us drive the agenda, and they've been very dynamic in pushing a number of common subjects. You see the announcements. It's not often that we do 3 announcements at the beginning, as GSMA at the beginning of MWC. In addition to other events that you see around, there's some which are sponsored by operators, things like the startup event and so on. But these 3 are really around the work we do for the industry. The first one is around handset affordability. Why? Because this is, after all, the biggest subject at the heart of what we're trying to achieve for Africa, which is the reduction of the usage gap. The usage gap is people who have coverage, so they could be on the mobile internet, but they're not on the mobile internet. And so the question is why? And the main reason why is because a smartphone is too expensive. So there has been a coalition of the willing, bringing together operators with the ITU, with Google, with many other players, to work on getting a bigger proportion of smartphones at lower price. How do you achieve that? 2 ways. One, work with the vendors to get cheaper phones. And for that, what we have done is, and that's part of the announcement, we're bringing out a specification that says we would, if you could bring a phone at a low price with this capability, this screen size, this battery life, these are the affordable handsets, but they cannot be, they have to work. They have to provide access to the internet in the proper way. We are convinced as operators that volumes could go up a lot. There's 3 billion people on the planet who should be connected and who are not connected. The usage gap for Africa alone is almost 1 billion people. It's 960 million people between, including North Africa, that should be using a smartphone and who are not using it. So What we're saying is, if you can bring a phone at a cheaper price, then this many people are your potential market. And don't miss this opportunity if you have the ability to scale up your volumes for these prices. So that's the first initiative. The other side is, of course, this is all fine. We can go cry, beg, borrow, and convince people to bring us cheap phones. But if then they're taxed like a luxury item, it kind of defeats the purpose. Recently, South Africa removed the luxury tax on phones more than about $150. It's 2,500 rand in South Africa. So there used to be a luxury tax, they've removed it. We're not saying that you should remove taxes on expensive phones that are, you know, $500 phones and $1,000 iPhones and things like that, because countries need to collect tax to manage their country. But in the specific case of entry-level smartphones, there is so much to be gained for society and for the economy that it's a bad choice to tax it. It's better to let people get it so that they can then consume and be part of the digital ecosystem. So that's on the theme of handset affordability, cheaper devices, lower taxes is the key message. The second subject is very linked to AI. We feel that there is a big need to provide AI in there are two sides to AI. There's an infrastructure debate, who will get data centers, who can afford them, how do you have the energy to power the data centers. That subject I think you've all read about. There is a big question around where the data centers can be installed. The other side of it is the relevance of AI. When you look at how the big AI models, like ChatGPT and so on, which are very popular, which lots of people use, how they are trained, how do they learn what they are using to answer your questions? They are trained by content that comes from the internet. Who puts content on the internet? The people who are connected. Where are the people who are connected? Very much in the global north. So if the unconnected cannot feed the model, how is the model going to answer their questions properly if he doesn't know what they think, what they do, what are their values, what are their language? And more importantly, just to start with, what is their language? If the language models are excellent in English, excellent in Spanish, excellent in Chinese, excellent in German and French, fine. But if they're very bad in Kiswahili or in even more, or I would say smaller languages in Africa, then you have a problem. So the operators in the G6 have gotten together with, I would say, an impressively large collection of companies, startups, which are trying to address this problem. And you have some on the stands who have stands in this exhibition who are trying to create new data services. Am I too far? Yeah, sorry. Oh, sorry. So we really need to get this coalition together because it's expensive to train a system on a language. So it's a waste to do it many times. And so putting together our efforts is, I think, a great opportunity to increase inclusion in Africa on something super useful. So that's the second theme. It's really African AI and language models that we are announcing today. Third subject is energy, because the other part of it is our networks don't function without electricity and phones don't get charged without electricity. So I'm talking about very basic things today, but I think they're the real subjects that we need to address. So we are working together with the World Bank and the African Development Bank to develop to work on the M300 program. Some initial work being done on that. It will take time, but what we're trying to achieve is that when there is an electrification program, it should take into account the telecom needs, because it would be a pity that you electrify a village, but there's no coverage there. And at the same time, bringing electricity to remove a generator is actually a very good decision because it pollutes less, it's much cheaper, and it allows you to develop the business much faster. And you can go to higher technologies much faster and cheaper from there. So these are the big themes that we covered. Of course, there are many others around inclusion, around women empowerment. There are a number of subjects and conversations here that I'd encourage you to discuss. But I think these are some of the themes. Angela, maybe you'd like to complete.
I think Vivek has done a good job of summarizing the challenges. And it's all about, we do understand the challenges, but how do we overcome those constraints so that we can move forward? For us in Africa, we know, we are the ones with boots on the ground, we know that we have to fast track. We have to fast track digital transformation in Africa as an agenda, because the time is here and now. The technologies exist, but at the same time, the challenges are there. So are we able to crowd in resources that are available to us without having to develop or create funds for Africa with the resources that we have in our people, in our skill sets, in our understanding the different collaborative approaches that can be taken. We do understand there are projects in, for example, in West Africa, Orange collaborating with OpenAI on Wolof, Ethiotel working with Amharic and other languages in Ethiopia, South Africa as well, Masahane doing a lot of things there, Power AI. So many people are doing so many things. How do we crowd in a lot of the efforts that are already in place in order to make sure that we present one marketplace in Africa? Because if you look at it across the globe, it's the power of one. 1 billion in China, 1 billion in India, 1 billion in America and Europe. How do we get the power of 1 billion? And in Africa, according to the statistics today, it's 1.5 billion in Africa. How do we get the 1.5 billion to come together? One marketplace, right? How do we get all our countries in Africa to provide a harmonious, harmonized approach to digital trade, to digital services, and provide one marketplace? And how do therefore look at all our laws that look at cross-border data, which is very critical in the age of AI, data, sovereignty, security, building trust, to be able to create that harmonization across our different policy frameworks, regulatory frameworks, data protection, security, in order to understand how we can unlock and how we can present Africa as one marketplace. And that's what we're talking about here in terms of these three areas that are critical for sustaining investment in the sector in Africa. We're already in 2025, 5 years or 6 years into 5G. And we're saying that unless we fast track adoption of the internet for our people, we'll be looking at a digital divide and an African underclass of a population where our people are not benefiting from the modern benefits of a connected life. And so that's what we're discussing here today. I'm open to questions in terms of how we are practically going to see how we can create those partnerships, create those opportunities to work together and unlock those opportunities. As Vivek mentioned, even when you look at the area of energy, the nexus and the synergies between energy and digital inclusion cannot be understated, because we've seen that where countries have greater access to energy, data is more affordable, right? And it is unfair for low-income households to pay a premium just to access data, because then we begin to see inequalities in how we are beginning to bring people online. Why should they pay more for the same access as a digital right in this day and age to having a connected life? And so looking at all these challenges around the progress and the progression of emerging technologies, 5G, big data, IoT, AI, looking at energy and other structural infrastructure challenges that we have, how do we look at the nexus in how Africa is able to allocate funds that also drive digital inclusion, even as we look at access to electricity, because those go hand in hand. And so we look at them together. So we want to say that the industry is open as a partner to governments, to development partners, to be able to move as quickly as possible and fast track our digital transformation agenda in the region. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Angela. Thank you, Vivek. I guess really now we'd like to just open up to you guys. So if I can hand over to Juliet, she will manage the manage your questions and direct them away. Juliet.
Thank you so much, Mike. So we are going to start with Paula, and then Mahe, and then we are going to go with Francine from RBA. Yes.
There we go. Hi, I'm Paula Gilbert. I'm the editor of Connecting Africa, which is a Pan-African online publication. So I guess my question actually is a practical question about the coalition. What exactly did the 6 operators agree to in terms of bringing down pricing? What is that price that we're looking at? Because from the announcement, it just kind of sounds like they agreed prices should come down. But how exactly are you going to get countries either to drop the taxes or the manufacturers to also drop the pricing? Kind of, what is the coalition going to do, I guess?
What we're going to do is pretty simple. First, we agreed because you do see $20 phones, but are they fit for purpose? Are they things that you want to have on the network? Are they things that are going to last long enough? Because these are big buys for the people who have not bought smartphones yet, right? I mean, this is a big part of their income. This could be several days, weeks of income for them. And so you need to make sure that when they buy it, they're not going to waste. It's going to serve the purpose. Otherwise, it's a complete waste. So first we defined a minimum spec, and we said anything at this level or above is fit for purpose. And if you build it, we believe that we have volume to undertake to place it in the market. Then what we're doing is having a dialogue with OEMs. And telling them, well, this is what we need. Where can you get the price? And obviously, we know that at $40, the numbers jump. At $30, they jump even more. So what we can provide, because we can procure together, and these are not, we're not a purchasing organization, but if we give them the elasticity, these are big companies and these are big volumes. On the planet, there's 3.1 billion people who need a phone as part of the usage gap. In Africa alone, there's 1 billion. So when you have those price points, it does give a market indication to the vendors, and they understand it super well. They say, okay, so if I do this and I can hit this price, this is the kind of volumes, this is the size of the market we're looking at. Of course, that's not the only thing. There's also circularity, but it's much more difficult to manage. Circularity in terms of reuse of phones. It looks like a great idea. We'd love to support it. We actually support it as much as we can. But it's fair to say that the supply chain difficulties, especially for low-end phones, makes it very difficult because, it takes more to get that phone from one customer to another, unless it's done at micro-local level. So that's what we're doing. On taxes, several things. We obviously had a good dialogue with the South African government, and the minister there made this move on reducing taxes. So now we're telling everybody else, hey, look at what South Africa has done. They're smart. They're doing something clever. They're doing something good. We also believe that this is not, we're not alone in saying this. The UNECA, which is the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, has done a pretty in-depth work on the impact of taxation of telecoms on the GDP. So we're working based on that excellent report, which is very detailed, and it's real economics. It's not just, oh, be nice, we'll do something. It's really, okay, if you have the tax level going down by this many points, that creates this many connections, that creates this much activity, that creates this much VAT at the end, because there is economic activity. So what you bring down in tax, you more than recover quickly on the GDP and even on the fiscus. So those are studies that we share with governments to convince them. Actually, it's one of those where everybody kind of understands that a more digitized country typically is more economically efficient, and hence development ensues, right? So it's not a very novel idea. We've been saying it for a long time because we're true believers because we're part of that industry, but a lot of people understand that, and there have been lots of studies. But here, going all the way down to tax and direct correlation to GDP is super interesting. So that's how, those are the tools. The way GSMA operates is we try to convince with sturdy facts, sturdy economic analysis, and that's what we do. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that answer. I just wanted to remind the press that you can ask in Kinyarwanda or French, and we'll be able to translate if that's okay. Yes, all right. So we can go to Marie and then Francine.
Maher Hajbi, Jeune Afrique. J'ai deux questions. La première concerne l'énergie. Dans un contexte de transition énergétique, on sait que plusieurs pays africains n'ont pas vraiment les moyens et l'accès à l'énergie. Est-ce qu'on est obligé de promouvoir l'énergie renouvelable ou toute forme d'énergie est bonne à prendre, notamment l'énergie fossile? Et on sait que ces dernières années, il y a vraiment un courant qui critique ouvertement les énergies fossiles. Ça, c'est pour la première question concernant l'énergie. On parle assez souvent de la maison connectée, l'intelligence artificielle, les taxes, l'énergie, justement. Quelle serait la top priorité pour les États et les opérateurs africains qui ne peuvent pas se concentrer sur tous les domaines?
So 2 questions. Maybe we translate them first for the others, or? Yeah.
Okay, so he's asked about clean energy, asking if countries are focusing on their top priorities on which energy, and if, am I getting that correct? Est-ce que tu peux répéter la question pour que je puisse traduire?
Première question concerne l'accès à l'énergie. Est-ce que toute énergie est bonne à prendre? On sait qu'on est dans un contexte de transition énergétique. Certains pays africains ne disposent pas de moyens pour produire de l'énergie renouvelable.
Okay.
Donc dans ce contexte, toute forme d'énergie est bonne à prendre. Et pour la deuxième question, elle concerne...
Est-ce que je peux traduire ça
Oui.
d'avant? Okay, so he's saying that there is a shift to clean energy, and not all countries in Africa are able to transition to clean energy. And now the question is, are they only focusing on clean energy? Now the second question is, la deuxième question?
On évoque plusieurs sujets depuis ce matin, notamment les taxes, l'intelligence artificielle, l'infrastructure numérique et aussi l'énergie. Plusieurs États africains ou opérateurs télécoms ne peuvent pas se concentrer sur l'ensemble de ces sujets. Quelle serait éventuellement la top priorité pour ces États et opérateurs africains?
Okay, so now the second question is about AI, handset and taxes, and now he's asking if the countries are focusing on all of it, since they can't focus on all of it at the same time. So the question is, what are the top priorities for countries? Is it taxes? Is it handset? Is it AI?
So would you prefer? Sorry. Okay, on the first question, fossil fuel or renewable. We as an industry, and under the leadership of GSMA, we have taken a commitment to neutrality by 2050. So for us, it's very clear, our industry, let's not forget, we're the good guys. Why are we the good guys? Because it's thanks to with digital communications, you avoid, in many cases, transportation. You can work remotely. Digitizing processes does allow you to remove paper costs, does allow you to simplify a number of things, where people don't have to go somewhere for an approval. They can stay at home and do it remotely. So at the basis, digital is good, does help, is a helper or an enabler to the ecological transformation. But that said, it doesn't mean we should be burning fuel like mad. One of the examples that I mentioned when I talked about M300, which is electrification, I think the M300 is very much weighted towards renewables, because if you're doing it today, you'd better do it on renewables as much as you can, and Africa does have some benefits with the sun and the ability to store energy in batteries. So we are replacing a diesel generator. That costs a fortune, usually pollutes quite a lot, and actually requires you to go carry the petrol, usually using fossil fuel, because it's not an electric car that's taking the diesel to the base station. Usually, it's going to be a diesel truck. I mean, it's a big waste of fossil fuel, and it's a big pollution angle. So we are all for working with the World Bank on electrification, because And then electrification as much as possible on renewable, but it's for the countries to focus on renewables. But we'd rather use clean energy than fossil fuel. So that's very clear for our industry. Removing generators is a real priority. That's on the first subject. On the second subject, I would say there are two of them which are super connected. Usage gap reduction, which means you have to work on smartphones. You have to get, nothing starts until you get people connected. And it's a $2 trillion opportunity that we're staring at. On the other hand, if you don't make the content useful for people, they're not going to get connected. So you do need to look at languages, because you have lots of people who will not get connected if they don't find content that is interesting to them and that they can understand and that they can use every day. So I think the focus, and sometimes it's a lot to do. And that's why it's usually collective efforts that help you to move forward. The power of partnership is that to work on on handset cost reduction, one operator alone can go and say, please give me a cheaper phone, he's going to get something. If as an industry we say there is a benefit in building phones which are $10 cheaper, $20 cheaper than what we find today, and then millions of people will get connected, then you get the means to do it. On AI, if one company trains the system and then provides those data sets so that others can use them to build services, that allows smaller companies to enter the AI game at a much lower cost. So I'd say the key is not, to drop subjects. The key is really to look at this holistically. What you want is for more people to use the mobile internet in their language on things that are useful for them. That's the idea. And so that's the approach we should have.
Thank you very much. So we go to Francine, and then we will have another couple of questions.
Thank you. So for me, my question is, last week we just concluded the ISO annual meeting here at KCC. We talked about the standardization of everything coming here to Africa. You mentioned that one of the ways to close this large gap, this large usage gap, is in the affordability of the tools. But how are you ensuring that these tools are on the level, on the standards that we need here in Africa, now that we've seen that some phones and other tools we use are not that durable?
It's as GSMA, we live because there is a standard. If there was not a standard which is the same worldwide on 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, we wouldn't exist. So we would like to keep we are there to protect the standard. What we've done on affordable handsets, we've not said, give me a cheap phone. We've said, give me a cheap phone that is good enough to ensure that people in Africa can have a proper access to the mobile internet. Actually, for Africa, we've added a few other features. We said, we need a longer battery life. Maybe we don't need a screen the size of a TV. Okay, fine, we can have smaller, but it's not a small screen, because if you want to watch video, if you want to read a document, if you don't have a PC, you do want to have a screen that's good enough, large enough. Do you need it to be strong enough to play super fast video games? Maybe not. So that's the specification we gave, because you can't ask them to give you a Formula One car for the price of a bicycle. I mean, you do have to be reasonable. But what are the needs that would allow people to go digital, to access mobile money, to access information, to communicate with their friends and family, and which would be durable? Because it shouldn't be, because the easy answer is, oh, a phone which is 3 years old is fine. That's not the answer. You have to be at a generation that is strong enough that people who buy it can keep it for a long time. And that's what we tried to do.
Excuse me, Vivek. Before we move to the second question, RB was requesting if you can repeat that in French, since they have a session in French on TV, just briefly about what you said.
Oh, yes, please.
The question that Francine asked.
Yes, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, I can try. Yes, I want it for our in French bulletin. Ok. Alors, la question est la durabilité des appareils qu'on utilise qui viennent en Afrique, la standardisation. Comment on va avoir cette... please help.
So you were asking about
I was asking
I got
the
it.
same question
Yeah.
about how are we going to cross this usage gap while also keeping in mind that these tools have to be durable,
okay.
cheap but
Mhm.
durable.
Mhm.
La question de la durabilité des terminaux est extrêmement importante. Oups. Nous n'avons pas simplement dit il nous faut des terminaux pas chers. Nous avons défini une spécification, c'est-à-dire une liste de besoins que doivent remplir les terminaux, et après, on va regarder à quel prix on peut le faire. Mais s'ils ont peu de capacité, s'ils sont fragiles, s'ils ne tiennent pas la chaleur et la poussière, et s'ils n'ont pas une batterie longue, ils ne sont pas bien adaptés au marché africain dans certains cas, notamment les marchés ruraux. Donc, on a mis des précisions sur la durée des batteries, on a mis des précisions sur l'écran, on a mis des précisions sur l'étanchéité, pour être sûr que ces terminaux en logiciel et en matériel sont durables, parce que les personnes qui vont les acheter vont avoir envie de les garder un certain temps pour les rentabiliser.
Alors,
Merci.
c'est fini les téléphones qu'on utilise pour ça. Bon. Ça enflamme.
Je pense qu'il est important que là, notre but, c'est que des fournisseurs de qualité fournissent des téléphones de qualité pour que les gens puissent profiter de l'Internet correctement.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup Vivek et Francine. Alors we are going to go to Tabitha, CNBC, and then Moses Kahiji, and then we'll have also Vincent from the New Times.
Heritage Times.
Who?
Heritage Times.
All right, yeah.
Okay, thank you. My name is Tabitha Muthoni from CNBC Africa. So building Africa's digital future will require so many things, and the most critical here is policies. So what policy actions would you recommend for governments and even mobile phone manufacturers to factor in?
I'd say it starts with money. I'll start with spectrum. Spectrum is one of the keys, and for too long it's become I would say a means of collecting money. There's a very simple concept. I think everyone understands it. $1 spent on spectrum is $1 that is not spent on infrastructure, on rolling out network, on providing services. So clear, predictable spectrum policy, long-term allocations, and reduced taxation on the sector of telecoms ultimately generate more benefit for the GDP than just making money on the input, which is telecoms. So I'd say on the policy side, it's ready predictability, in particular on spectrum, and low taxes. Because when you increase taxes on telecom services, you reduce the ability to roll out these services, you reduce the ability to provide coverage, you reduce the ability to modernize the equipment, to go and put in 4G and 5G for new services. And that's the key, I would say, in terms of policy. But go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, one more thing I can add as well is the telecoms business is a long-term investment. Telecoms infrastructure is not here to be today and pulled out tomorrow. So when you see investment coming in, it's here for the long haul. We are celebrating in most countries in Africa 25 years or 30 years of mobile network operators in that country having invested. And this is just to say, therefore, when we're talking about the kind of policies that attract investment, not only to come but to stay, there is a poor practice in the region that has licensing regimes of less than 10 years. What does that mean? And some licensing regimes also have it by technology as opposed to just communications as a service. And so when you see a new technology comes in, it's another opportunity to create another license fee for that technology. And that practice is declining, but it hasn't been fully eradicated in Africa. But when you look at the licensing durations, you find the telecoms operators end up with 5-year durations, 10-year durations. I mean, that's the general practice. Whereas if you were to have 25-year license durations, you're able to amortize your investment over the long run, meaning you don't front load that investment cost and then have to pass it on to the consumer. And that's why we're saying that our citizens are paying a premium to have communications as a service in Africa because of those practices that do not allow for affordability. And so one of the call to action is, can we extend those licenses to 25 years and beyond as a practice that allows certainty to investors, because most of these networks are funded by investors, and therefore bringing that attractiveness to the sector as an area for investment is critical. And we say particularly as we go into 5G and beyond, AI, data, cloud technologies, it's very, very critical for us to show that attractiveness in order for foreign direct investments to flow into Africa.
So we go to Moses.
Thank you. I'm called Moses Nehimji. I write mobile money has generated businesses across different ranges, but we are seeing very from the internet resource. We've been using 4G. In Rwanda, we've had it for years. And now we're going into 5G, but still transition into young people or businesses really driving, getting business, building businesses, or even getting value out of the internet resource, which is really very significant. And now we are going into AI, which is also another layer of opportunity. So what are you doing as GSMA to see that there is that transition from resource to business, where we can have value, real-time value generated from these resources?
Actually, I don't agree at all with what you said. And I'll tell you why. Just start with mobile money. Mobile money, 2.1 billion mobile money accounts in the world. Okay. Many of them in Africa, rock star country, Kenya. I mean, honestly, we all know it, so yeah. We're not in a competition, but Kenya did very well, and I happen in my past to have had some association with M-Pesa, so I know how good it is. You have 514 million active 30-day accounts. And how many transactions? So tell me, when you do $1.68 trillion transactions through the system, I mean, that's economic activity. That's a person able to buy vegetables in the morning, sell them on the market, get the money and spend it on medicine in the evening or on food or on something else. This is real stuff. Now, when you look at the contribution of the mobile sector to Africa's economy, it's not the money that we spend, you know, to build our offices and pay the salaries of our employees. We contributed $220 billion to Africa's economy in 2024. Do you think it's not just the money we spend on telecoms? Because otherwise, you're right, it would be a closed subject. It is the productivity gains, it is the e-commerce activity. If you don't have internet, you can't do e-commerce. You can't buy remotely. You can't order a product from someone in another village. All of this is made possible by the mobile internet. And so these are activities that we capture. I'd refer you to the Mobile Economy Africa report of 2025. You're going to be very surprised at the amount of money that is created outside the mobile sector through productivity gains and activity gains in the economy. Just to contest, to make the conversation fun, okay?
Mobile money has data segment is still there's still a bit of a disconnect when you look at, because majority of the people, let's say in sub-Saharan Africa, they use 4G to surf the internet, to watch YouTube, to do basic things, which elsewhere in other economies, such a resource is a big business opportunity. Many generating a lot of money out of it. But for us, this part of the world, we're still lagging behind in really getting business value out of this. 4G is already a big of a resource. So if we haven't really derived the maximum value from 4G, what are we doing to maximize value from 5G? So when you look,
you see a very different picture. Is the slide that I showed in one of my keynotes, where you see by sector the speed at which their contribution to GDP increases as 5G increases. Take agriculture. The fact that you're able to do precision agriculture, that you can order your fertilizer, that the agri sector, you have a number of startups that have gone and put out products and services that help farmers every day to get information, to get weather information, to get crop information, to get pricing information. So if you have the internet and it helps you to know where you need to sell and at what price, that is a lot of value. It might take you 3 minutes on the phone, but it's worth much more than anything else you can do that day, if you can get the right price. If you look at industries, it's true that in Africa, industrial companies have not modernized their equipment as fast as, for instance, China, where the industrial 5G is extremely vibrant and exciting. But that's a matter of cycle. We do believe that you should get out of the chicken and egg situation. If you have 5G, you can automate your machines. You can remote control. You can deliver things through drones. These are all things that come together when you've got the infrastructure. And it's not just theory, because we see it happening elsewhere in the world. And also in countries, not necessarily in super rich countries, also in countries which have rural areas that need to be automated, that have old factories that need to be modernized, and this is helping them to do it. And the Chinese example for that is pretty impressive.
If I can also add to that, when you look at the story of mobile money, so $1 trillion in Africa, you ask ourselves, where is that coming from? The majority, if the statistics show us that only 28%, close to 30, let's say, round it up, are online. That's only 310 million people in Africa are online. And most of the mobile money works on either SMS USSD or if you have a smartphone. So perhaps those 310 million have a smartphone, therefore are using mobile money on an app. The majority, where the rest of the 1.2 billion, SMS and USSD. Now, if you can unlock value, and that's what the discussion is about, value. If you're able to unlock value on the old technologies to the point of $1.1 trillion, can you imagine how much more Africa would unlock if the remaining 70% who are offline had access to a smartphone, and you moved mobile money from SMS and USSD to smartphones, because that's where the value is added. The ability to be able to see goods, to purchase goods, to connect the market to the seller, to be able to transport it, as you've seen how it happens. And that's the value where we're saying 70% of our team are not playing the game. We are understaffed in a game that we cannot play. We look at it, I use the analogy of football. You need an 11-man team, right? Let's say the goalkeeper is a given. Of the 3 players, that's our 310 million people that are playing, 70% are on 3G. So 70%. So those 3 players, 2 are on 3G, 1 possibly on 4G. You'll be lucky if that one other person is on 5G. The game is rigged. You ask yourselves, where are the other 7 players? When we look at the statistics, which is what Vivek talked about, out of the 7, 6 of them are on the field but sitting on the bench. 2 of them have the kit, but they're just not playing. They're sitting. So you ask yourself, why aren't you playing? Those are the guys who have access to a smartphone, but don't use it. Either digital literacy is a problem, relevant content is not in their local language. So they have the kit, but they're not playing. They're on the bench. And what happens to the other 4? They don't have the kit. Those are the 660 million who do not have a device. And then we have the one guy who's in the locker room. That's the person who doesn't have coverage. That's the 9% we talked about who are yet to be covered with broadband technology. And so this is the opportunity we have before us as Africa. It's about empowering our people. They need the device. The device gives them access to create content, not just consume content, create their content in local languages. And that's the power of AI. So you see, it's not whether we should do handsets first, usage gap, and AI. It's actually the same coin, 2 different sides. Because AI will help us overcome the challenges of relevant content. You can now build your own content. You can now get it in your local language, because then you're able to train the models in your language. We have 2,000 plus languages in Africa. When are we going to begin to scratch the surface to bring everybody online? Because leaving anyone behind is leaving them offline. And that is what we need to turn around in Africa today.
Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you, Vivek. We're going to go, because we remain with 15 minutes. So we want to take a question from Haley. And then Vincent, Wycliffe, Amanda as well.
Thank you so much. And you guys, actors, have demonstrated ambitions to transform digital transformation in Africa. But I think there might be some challenges. What do you think? What are the outstanding challenges that are external, that not from you, that are not they are not from you, from the other side, from external actors or factors? What are they? The factor that are hindering the digital transformation in Africa. Thank you.
I think the biggest one, which has been received the least amount of focus on as a region, has been access to electricity. Because think about it. As we've mentioned, the countries that have more access to electricity, the affordability of data or digital services is better for them. At the same time, when you're looking at moving from feature phones to smartphones, they need access to electricity. And the majority of our population don't have access to electricity. So we ask ourselves, if you then have to motivate them to get the device, and then what? So they need access to electricity to be able to power the device, because that's a challenge that needs to be there. And so even as we look at the forward-looking, should we be able to attract investors to build data centers in Africa, right? Where will those data centers be located? Because then they'll maybe consume all the energy that we currently have for ourselves, number one. Or even if we have the AI, then how else will it be used? Because then AI is hungry. You have to be able to provide access to electricity for you to be able to create content in those AI-based applications. So we have structural challenges, but what is clear that needs to be fixed now collaboratively is ensure that digital inclusion goes hand in hand with electrification. And so it's a call it's a bold call to our leaders that we need to sit together to see that all that the investment that is being channeled for developing energy projects, we have to look at it in the form of how can it also be productively used to also include digital inclusion. Otherwise, we'll not be able to solve that opportunity.
So, excuse me, you've been talking Africa as one country, but we know that Africa has almost 54 countries. And apart from electrification in Africa, the problems of electrification in Africa, we do have some other problems that are even critical more than that. There are some countries that have some political instability, and to move something where the politics are not going very well is very hard for everything to sustain. How are you just intervening in these countries where the politics and the people that are there as victims and they need to be connected? How are you guys trying to enter in those countries to make sure that you are going to connect and to connect those people who are just in those kind of countries and communities?
Vivek mentioned in his presentation earlier today that between 2017 to date, the number of people who have not been covered by mobile broadband has reduced from 35% to 9%. That is remarkable progress in the last 8 years. These 9% is not for the lack of being able to deploy mobile broadband technologies, because when you look at the majority of those who are unconnected at this point in time, they are mainly in places that either have a lot of political instability or are war-torn areas, very hard to reach areas because of lack of infrastructure, roads or anything that allows infrastructure to be built, and therefore the economics of bringing technology to them are hard. But the good news is the industry is in partnerships with all partners who are developing technology solutions. And we see that there are opportunities, particularly in this day and age, on satellite connectivity. Our industry members are working with satellite providers to be able to cover those areas so that they're able to also have access to affordable mobile broadband technologies, because at the end of the day, those technologies are agnostic to the device. And so partnerships in working with different forms of technologies should be employed to be able to bring connectivity to everybody. And that's how we're looking at those solutions, that in spite of where you are, our ability to leverage technologies of today to be able to provide that connectivity is how we'll close the coverage gap that exists today in the shortest time possible.
Thank you so much, Angela. So we are going to go to Vincent and then Amanda and Wycliffe.
Thank you so much. My name is Vincent Sudhir. I'm a reporter from the New Times. Some of my questions were answered, but I'll focus on the AI or on the AI part of the business. Now, the first question is, is it possible to know how much is going to be spent in this? How much does this partnership cover, if I may ask? And then the last question is, like we've been talking about, there is lack of political will. AI systems need high computing power. And maybe she answered a little bit more about it, but is there a strategy from GSMA, like a plan to support or mobilize these African countries to accelerate AI adoption regardless of those challenges we are seeing? And then if I may ask, the last question is, how are we now going to ensure that all these developed AI systems are relevant to our cultures, our way of living as Africans? Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of amounts of investment, we don't have the total, we don't count the total. Right now we're bringing people together. Some of them have money, some of them have ideas, some of them have software, some of them have data, and it's by bringing them all together that you are going to build sophisticated AI systems. Some people who have money are going to invest in data centers. There's some African groups that want to do it. The Action group mentioned that they were building data centers. MTN, Airtel have discussed their data center strategy, so there will be spend, but we've not gone out and made a total, because that's not the point. What we want is for AI to be used, and indeed, to your question, to be relevant. And the relevance question starts with language. To be relevant for the culture, you need to use the words. So they could be audio, if people are not writing. They could be text, but it's basically training the models on what people do and what people use that will ensure that these models are relevant for the African cultures, for the values, for the habits, for the things that are useful to them. I mean, if you're a villager in Africa, maybe how to repair a Tesla is not your biggest subject that you want to ask your AI. But maybe you want to ask them about how to repair something else, or an equipment, or what to do on farming, or to prepare your classes for your school for your children. So the content, the AI has been developed by the connected, for the connected. Why? Because it's trained on internet data, on things that are on the internet. Who puts things, if you are not connected, you're not going to put things on the internet. So so the AI can only be relevant if we put language models and if we connect the people. That's the point. But we care a lot about that. That's why, I mean, if you notice, we've talked about that pretty much 1/3 of the time today. And it was a big part of all the conversation today around the relevance of AI for people. It's because if we don't want anybody to be left behind, it's not by giving them an AI model that is trained for the global north that it's going to be relevant for Africa. And we recognize that, and we need to shout it out loud to make sure people take it into account.
Thank you. Wycliffe?
My questions have been, most of them have been answered, but maybe to ask a more direct question. You said in South Africa you've been talking to the government there, and they reduced or they removed some taxes. Are you in touch with some of the mobile manufacturing institutions, and what is the feedback you are getting in terms of lowering the cost?
Candidly, big interest. Because they see, okay, there's a will. They also want to sell more phones. So they're interested because they see that there's a limit to the number, that we're slowing down the number of people who are connecting to the internet. That for them is 100% of their business, is selling phones to people. Yes, there is replacement of older phones, etc. But if you don't bring new people into the mobile world, their business also goes down. So producers are interested, and we see more and more experiments. There have been some experiments already by countries, by operators with certain vendors to do bundles. You've seen $14 phones by Vodacom, promo at $5 phones. Obviously, with a connection, so you do pay a bit more every month to keep the phone, but so that it's easy to start. You know, an entry-level $5 phone. You will see more and more of those across the continent if we are able to bring the price down a bit more. So I'd say I'm very optimistic on this initiative. I think things can move in this area.
Thank you.
We're doing a study on the impact, analyzing the impact of that fiscal policy decision in South Africa, and we'll be sharing the findings in November, on the 10th of November, on the back of an event in South Africa. So we'll be happy to share with you those findings to be able to see how we can share those wider across Africa for those policies to be adopted and implemented globally in Africa. Thank you.
So we're going to take the last question from Amanda.
Thank you. My name is Amanda Mahenda from East Africa Media Group, and my question is coming back a bit on the Congress, MWC, and as the theme is Converge, Create, Connect, emphasizing collaboration and innovation, what concrete outcomes or collaborations, partnerships do you anticipate emerging from this Congress? And what enduring legacy do you hope it will leave for Africa's digital transformation? Thank you.
I'd say I'll list 4 of them very briefly. One, the fact that the G6 got together once again as leaders of the ecosystem across Africa to say we want to do certain things together because it will help us to accelerate Africa's progress on digital. And there they announced some more work on the affordable handset, the work on AI that we just mentioned, where it's not just the operators, but really, I don't know how many, we've reached, what, 20 odd people around the table, if I'm not mistaken. More than 20 companies that are ready to come together and partner to develop AI for Africa in a stronger way, and I expect that to deliver strong results. The third area is the partnership, of course, with the energy providers, with M300 in particular with World Bank and ADB. And finally, there is, I would say, more partnership and a task force around child protection with UNICEF that also gets announced during this event on a different subject, but which is also linked, because if the internet is not safe, people will not connect. So it's important that we take all the steps to protect the children when they go online. So these are examples of partnerships. So as you can see, bringing together people in a conference like this, it's also a way for us to say, let's try to agree a partnership that we can announce when we come together in Kigali. And as you can see, we've actually worked very hard to make sure that many of these partnerships come to fruition during MWC Kigali. Thanks for your question.
Thank you very much, Vivek. And for those of you that are interested in the child protection stuff, we'll have more to say on that tomorrow. So, you know, watch this space. Thank you all very much. I'm afraid we are out of time. I'd just like to hand back to Vivek to just, you know, give us some final reflections, and then do feel free to follow up with Kwame and Juliet and the team. And thanks very much for coming along.
Just a very short word. I think you've seen GSMA is passionate about Africa. Angela and her team are every day in countries. So there is a part of it which is there are problems that are common to many African countries, but then each country has its policy issues, its local context issues, and so we work and at a local level to try to address them as well as we can. We try to bring in as many, we believe that this answer to the acceleration of digitization of Africa, which is a big requirement to enable empowerment in this continent, will go through partnerships. So when we bring people together in an event like this and throughout the year, through the partnerships and the alliances, we're doing the useful work to ensure that we accelerate Africa. So you'll continue seeing us motivated on these subjects, and there'll be more to come. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Press conference here in Kigali in Rwanda 2025. Make sure to stay with us and make sure to follow ENG TV to stay connected and follow the exclusive highlights. I am Amanda Mahenda.